Good evening, my sizzling sorcerers of sautés and sorrow. This is the Heathen Burgundy hour, where the runes are bold, the guests are bolder, and the only thing rare in this room is emotional availability. Tonight I'm joined by a man whose cast iron soul has been seasoned in goat fat and generational trauma. He's the founder of Meet the Void, the food truck that's been leaving burn marks on the culinary scene and possibly your astral body. Ladies and gentle heathens, put down your kombucha, light a clove, and welcome to the table, Chef Einar Blackheart.
Good evening, Heathen Burgundy. How are you doing this fine evening?
I'm doing well, and it's an honor to have such a illustrious chef as the first guest on the Heathen Burgundy Hour.
It is absolutely my pleasure to be here. I'm glad I could take time away from my busy schedule of slinging sausage and narcissism to actually appear on this show.
We definitely appreciate it. We know you're a busy man. So let's get down to it. We've got some questions that my producer and some of your fans have written in, and we'll get right down to it. Chef, first things first. Your food truck is named Meet the Void. That sounds less like a place to eat and more like a place to confront everything your therapist warned you about. What do you have to say about that?
You wouldn't happen to be a fan of Star Wars, would you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, I know a lot of Star Wars fans refuse to recognize the validity of Empire Strikes Back, but Empire provided my avenue to create Meet the Void. I've been with a lot of, shall we say, problematic people in my life. Problematic people who forced me to do a deep dive into myself. And my creation of Meet the Void, and by extension Empire Strikes Back, that scene where Luke is forced to confront his darkest self, is what I wanted to do not only for my customers, but for the food I create as well. You come to me seeking food, I put you through something you don't want, and I give you something you need at the end.
That is extremely interesting, mind-blowing. So if you could, describe to us how Meet, M-E-A-T, the Void came to you.
Do you remember that scene in Fargo when they fed him into the wood chipper?
Yes.
So, I love butchering. I love being able to break down an animal. It's part of my whole wanting to know where the food, and by extension my customer's trauma, comes from. And the idea of being able to feed chunks of an animal, and by extension my customer's trauma, into that meat grinder to deliver sumptuous meat in tube form and all of its mutant derivatives, brought me enough pleasure to the point where I felt Meet the Void needed to come to fruition.
Interesting. Definitely interesting. Now let's address the bone broth, the big bone broth elephant in the room. Your daddy issues menu, a bold culinary experience that invites the diners to taste the trauma. Can you break that down for us?
You know, my daddy issues, as people have said, it's honestly a bit of a misconception. It's a bit of an exaggeration. I have honestly worked towards getting over the daddy issues that helped shape me into becoming a countercultural culinary icon. I became more interested in Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter.
Interesting.
That paved the way for my love of psychology, that paved my way into looking into serial killers, looking through the work of Ted Bundy, Albert Fish, Gary Ridgway, and all of the horrible people that make Netflix and podcast documentarians oodles and oodles of money. And I asked myself, Einar, how do I parlay this into food? Hannibal Lecter brought things to the forefront, feeding Ray Liotta his own brain, and I wanted to feed my customers a piece of their own mind while they were chowing down as well. So I said to myself, let me name things on my menu after things we've all gone through, as a way of essentially eating your feelings, with and without the guilt.
So, essentially, psychological delicatessen.
Exactly.
So we've had the pleasure that some of your people sent over an advanced copy of one of your menus, and we're very interested in some of the menu items you have on here. We'll start with some of the sides, which is actually your sides of resentment. One of them is repressed memory mac and cheese.
Oh.
Extra creamy but it'll still sneak up on you later. What was your inspiration for that?
Promised my publicist I wouldn't share a long chain of horrendous shit jokes while on the air, but dear Burgundy, you have twisted my arm and I feel compelled only to act. I lived with a few friends in Florida, Justin, Mama, if you're watching and listening to this, you will understand where I'm coming from. My very first foray into making baked mac and cheese came from a recipe that Benjamin Franklin himself brought to America from France. It was a 200-plus-year-old recipe that called for mustard powder in with the bechamel, with the cheese and the other seasonings. It had brought such a sour aspect to the mac and cheese that I may as well have been paying rent to the plumber for the amount of damage I had done to the bathroom. Now, I'm very, very firmly of the belief that a really big dump can be tremendously cathartic, but when you come to resent your own butthole for the terrible, terrible things you've done, I figured I would constantly remind myself and inform my customers, fuck around and find out, should you choose to order the mac and cheese.
That gives us something to think about. We'll move on to one of your interesting salads. We've got a Daddy Didn't Show Up salad. Massaged kale, beets, avocado, with a side of I'm working on myself. What was your inspiration for such an interesting salad choice?
I very firmly believe that while hipsters make the restaurant world go round, their money paves the way forward for a lot of things. I don't believe hipsters have any business working in the kitchens. I had a very lovely man by the name of Jason working in my kitchen, and he was going through some pretty heavy stuff, and he informed me that his own father, who was a proud soldier, had done some terrible things, and he was forced to spend some time in Leavenworth, and he never saw his father again. And the man who married his mother was one of those soft neckbeard Juilliard artists who force-fed him kale from the time he was 15. And he fell in with the stereotypical California hipster ethos of health is wealth, better my life, avocado toast. And he bankrupted himself gambling at Erewhon, and that's why he became a chef. So I made this salad not only in tribute to one of the weirdest line cooks I've ever written, but as an anathema, so to speak, a dagger in the heart of hipster culinary culture.
Stuff. One thing that caught my eye on your menu is you seem to have a very good deal on some of your combo meals for your truck, and one that's extremely interesting to me is the Father Figure Feast. Weekend custody burger with a side of neglect fries. What was your inspiration for this combo?
My greatest triumphs and greatest disappointments came from having burgers on the weekend. Now, my burgers are 100% farm-raised, unethically sourced, USDA enslaved beef. The farmers who cull my beef are forced to watch Schindler's List just to traumatize the slaughter that much harder. Everything is unethically sourced, as I said, and they are cooked on old school 1950s griddles in 100% pure beef lard.
So, kind of like the old saying of stewing in your own juices.
Precisely. We want those burgers juicy. We want them greasy because, to me, a good sandwich should be like good sex. If it's not sloppy and mildly regrettable, are you doing it right?
That is a very interesting...
And when you are overloaded and flooded with that heavy a degree of sensation, you are compelled. We had friends who broke into the research labs at McDonald's who leaked the secret that McDonald's French fries are blasted with liquid sucralose to make them addictive. We did the same thing, and we fried them in the duck fat of doubt. So when you are filled up, overloaded with sensation, you are compelled to eat those fries, so you regret that meal even harder.
Very, very deep and interesting information. There's a couple of more menu items I'd like to ask you about, and then we can move on to some more questions. Another one of your signature sandwiches is the Child Support Chicken Club. Grilled chicken breast, bacon, Swiss, bitter greens, served cold, like the child support payments. Where was your inspiration for such an interesting sandwich?
Would you happen to be familiar with the comedian Stephen Lynch?
Very interesting. I believe we travel in some of the same crazy circles.
He told me of his story of his most bitter divorce from his wife. When he caught his wife laying with his best friend Fred in an incredibly passionate embrace, he sought divorce immediately, and the first thing he had for lunch the day after was an ice-cold chicken club that had sat in a pickup window for too long at his local Quiznos. And I wanted to convey the same level of, I'm too fucking infuriated to cook because of everything that's happened. I'm too bitter to put my own passions into a meal that I want that meal to be as bitter and cold as I am.
Very, very interesting. We'll wrap your menu up with one of your drinks. It seems to be a very, very interesting drink, and from what I hear, one of your more popular ones. It's Daddy's Little Whiskey Lemonade. Strong, unexpected, and a bad decision. Where did you come up with such an interesting idea for a drink?
Well, I'm one of those people who unfortunately had their parents dab whiskey under their gums as a child. That unfortunately paved the way by the time I was 18 to becoming a whiskey snob who could out whiskey the liquor store salespeople when I would go in there to talk about spirits with people, because unfortunately I was not legally allowed to drink, but I could sure as fuck talk about it. And I had said to myself, the one thing that I want on a cold, hot, warm summer day, I'm incapable of recognizing seasons, on a temperate summer day is a refreshing glass of lemonade, but I want that super strong on the back end when that bourbon comes burning down my throat. Sour and fire. Just something about it appealed to me.
That is very, extremely interesting. It's amazing, the mind processes, and you're able to turn these things into culinary success. So we're going to move on to segment 2, which is called Meat as a Metaphor. Now, Chef, you've described your menu as both nourishment and vengeance. Some say your pulled pork sandwich can summon inner demons. Others say it's just spicy. Can you explain your food philosophy?
Yet again, I am defying my publicist, and they are in the corner right now just flipping me the bird. You're good, Desmond. Don't worry about it. We're about to get into this. My philosophy is very simple. I want you to enjoy yourself, but at the same time, I want you to be so flooded with sensation and flavor that you're fairly certain a Christian devil is attempting to seduce you into a pact.
That's just crazy. I mean, my only experience with food is mouth to stomach, and it's just amazing where you come up with these ideas.
A lot of people don't seem to grasp the fact, and I like to, through my food, ensure that people understand that there is that obvious mouth to stomach to asshole connection, but there is that connection between the heart and the mind. Are you eating something you like purely for nourishment, or are you eating something because you want to be flooded with an extreme of sensation?
Well, they do say that the brain and the gut are directly connected to each other. So you've also become something of a cult icon among divorced witches, tattoo apprentices, and rogue spirit guides. What's the strangest customer request you've honored in the back of your truck?
Now, do you want strange and gross, or do you want just strange?
I think we need to keep this, as I don't like the term PC, but I think we want to keep this as family as we can, because I know we've got a lot of family of all ages that are interested in your culinary expertise.
I had a customer approach the truck one day, right after freshly slaughtering a goat and throwing its entrails into a flaming pit to preserve my culinary prowess. And I was asked for one of our jalapeno sausages, but with natural salt. And the person refused to specify what sort of salt they wanted, because We've got about 15 varieties of salt on the truck. We've got everything from Stumptown coffee salt to the very same natron they embalmed King Tut with. And we use that natron to top our ritual rolls that our sausages go into. This person said, I don't care how you do it, sweat on it for me. So the thought had occurred to me, and I'm like, I know what we're gonna do. So I said, you're gonna have to give me about 10 minutes. I worked up a good enough sweat, and right as I served it to them, I rang my sweat-soaked bandana directly over the sausage, and they tasted it, and they said this is one of the greatest things they've ever had. They're doing a restaurant review of Meet the Void on their OnlyFans.
That is extremely interesting. So we've been told, and again, your publicist might not want this information to get out, but we've been told that all of this kind of started, the idea first started simmering in the skillet of your mind with an innocent request for a hot dog that was misunderstood. Can you elaborate on that? Is that something you can go into detail on?
This is just for you, Heathen Burgundy, for everyone listening on the PNN. I can elaborate on this, as this will be one of the teasers that is allowable in Meet the Void, in the Meet the Void cookbook, and the Meet the Void annotated companion to the cookbook. Because very much like video games and paganism, there is a very heavy amount of lore behind what we do.
Exactly.
I had a customer completely not understand what bratwurst was. My particular bratwurst vendor at the time sent me things that I can safely say are the size of several cardboard poster tubes for my sausages. A woman approaches my counter after ordering. She's holding it and she says, "Ma'am, sir, do you have any cutlery?" I said, "Unfortunately, ma'am, we don't." She turns around and proceeds to tell me, "Well, sir, that means you are a sexist. Women naturally have smaller mouths, and as such, not providing a woman with a smaller mouth cutlery so that eating for her is easier makes you a sexist." Thankfully, this was also during Pride Month, and several of my friends who were in the community were having a chat with me about something for my menu, because they did request a Pride Month special at the time, and they were my culinary dev team. They happened to have heard what this woman said, looked this woman dead in the face, and said, "Well, way to advertise your bedroom prowess, bitch." And thus, Meet the Void was born.
That is a very interesting story. And I know we moved away from your menu, but I'm going to go off script here for a second. And there was one that just really stood out to me that I'm very interested in. Can you shed some light on where the hot dad dogs came from? From what I understand, it's spicy, smoky, and questionably supportive.
So, I used to work with several elderly German men who we no longer work together because, unbeknownst to me, they were members of, shall we say, a German political party from the 1940s. However,
sad.
Some of the butchering techniques I learned from them inspired what we were going to do with Meet the Void. I wanted to do something punny and do something that'll make you keep coming back for more, and because of them, we initially developed the knockwursts of narcissism. And the knockwursts of narcissism, unfortunately, were proven to be so addictive that everyone kept coming back, regardless of how hard they tried to heal from how good those sausages were. And it was actually classified as a Class 3 controlled substance by the New York City Police Department, and we had to remove them from the menu.
Interesting.
The hot dad dog, however, is an all pork and beef sausage. It is not a hot dog. It is a sausage. We need to make that perfectly clear, because it is long enough for you to feel really dirty and self-conscious about consuming, and girthy enough that you feel even more so. It is a cured, smoked product that has a bit of cayenne pepper, a bit of deep-seated regret, and a bit of smoked red pepper flake in there. And yes, while it is good, the memory of it will linger like a parent who went out for milk 20 years ago and has yet to come back.
Riveting. And who doesn't enjoy a good sausage? So I've got to know, I've heard that you have a side passion. You actually are the lead singer for a emo-style boy band called Cannibal, and you've recently completed overseas your hot sausage tour. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yes, I can. See, Cannibal was founded by myself and a group of other chefs who also love performing and feeding their customers while at the same time making them question their own reality. This isn't some hippy-dippy avant-garde fine dining bullshit, but instead, we all firmly believe that Jeffrey Dahmer just wanted a lover he could keep forever, and that involved him drilling someone in the head and pumping them full of drugs to just keep them like a zombie. And we realized that our food collectively did very much the same, and we covered It's Gonna Be Me by NSYNC, and we realized that if we're gonna feed you, it's not gonna be us, it's gonna be you. And we wanted to make sure, and we called ourselves Cannibal, because we would make jokes on the tour bus about consistently eating each other, and we're like, we've got a short pop-up concept to do. Every one of the dogs is named after a serial killer. We have the Bundy Bratwurst, the Kaczynski Kreinerwurst, named for the Unabomber. That comes in a wooden box that smells like cat piss, dog hair, and milk. It's not for the faint of heart, it's definitely an acquired taste. However, we will be bringing the Cannibal truck in with Meet the Void one of these days for an event, and we hope to have you there.
That would be outstanding. I would love to be there. Now, as we'd like to keep this little interview upbeat as much as possible, we are interested in a rumor we heard that an incident that occurred on your European tour, which saw you in conflict with another band called Civil War. Would you like to delve into that, or is that still too fresh of a wound?
It is not a fresh wound. It's not really anything. It's more of a nagging pimple on my ass that I can't quite reach. So, however, as we do with Meet the Void and Cannibal, we like to provide catharsis. Let this be catharsis to the fans who were concerned. Civil War was founded by a bunch of throw-offs from the actual competent military history band Sabaton, which we're all big Sabaton fans here, and I hope the PNN and yourself enjoy Sabaton Burgundy. But that's neither here.
We have indeed enjoyed some Sabaton.
Love to hear it. The vocalist initially caught me off guard, because when I first saw him, I see this tall, gaunt man in what looked like a marching band conductor's jacket. He looked just wet. He looked like the girl from The Ring had just crawled out of the television. And I saw nothing but pale. He looked vaguely Eastern European and just really sleepy. I thought, holy shit, it's Tommy Wiseau. So I walked up to him and I instantly went, "Hi, Mark." He looks at me and goes, "Who the fuck are you? Get the fuck away from me." And I'm like, "Wait, wait, are you Gerard Way?" He goes, "No, I'm not Gerard Way. I'm the vocalist for Civil War." And I'm like, "Civil War? Never heard of her." And that's how the fight started.
What a interesting name for a band from the neutral country of, what's that? Sorry, no, they're from Sweden. Interesting. That's news to me. So here in our next segment, we like to play a word game here on the Burgundy Hour. And for your word game, we've come up with an interesting one. It's going to be called Dish or Daddy. I'll say a word, and you tell me if it's something you've cooked or something your father never gave you. Are you ready?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Tenderness.
Cooked.
Burnt ends.
Cooked.
Attention.
Daddy and cooked.
Salt.
Cooked.
Closure.
Daddy.
Moving on. I heard Meet the Void recently introduced a limited time menu item called Stepdad Energy. I need answers. Is that a dry rub or an emotional crust?
I've been told that the crust my seasoning blends provide is in and of itself an emotional crust, because it elicits such a good response that can only be delivered by the affection a step-parent never could. And whether yourself, and whether you find yourself stuck in a washing machine, whether you find yourself stuck under the couch eating my food, the one thing that will be always on your mind when you smell my food and eventually my meat finds its way into your mouth is, what are you doing, stepdad? That's the quality we deliver.
Then beats quality. So, the next segment is Truck of Thusis. Every food truck owner has faced a dark night of the soul. For some, it's a health inspection. For others, it's backing into a rune circle. When did you nearly give up the griddle?
Okay. 2 occasions I can think of off the top of my... There was one very unfortunate instance outside of San Diego Comic-Con back in 2006. Meet the Void was backing into the parking lot getting ready for a day of service when we hear one of the most ungodly sounds of food toppling over. We turn around and we realize it's not food, it is a bunch of 350-pound men dressed up as Klingons. White dudes in full blackface Klingon makeup with armor, and they made their mom's van look like a Klingon bird of prey. I don't know how it was remotely street legal, but watching multiple morbidly obese men attempt to chase you in a vehicle with batleths screaming "Qapla" and "for the Emperor," you tend to realize that the food you had initially started to make was contributing to that level of obesity, and it weighed on me heavily.
That is very interesting.
And the other incident is more magical than morbidly obese Star Trek geek mundane. We had a rather interesting incident when we were at Lilith Fair a couple of years ago, and we had run into Melissa Etheridge's production manager. She had informed us that Melissa is going completely vegan, and if she is to walk by, you are not to solicit her. Unfortunately, we found out the hard way that Melissa Etheridge has a doppelganger about, and we fed Melissa Etheridge's doppelganger several of our hot dad dogs, and we got to watch them melt and reintegrate with the 4th dimension. Several of my men were driven to the depths of madness, another tried to summon Cthulhu to unmake reality. But either way, terrible things happened that day.
Just goes to show you never know what happens at Comic.
Exactly.
So what's next for Meet the Void? Are we talking expansion, brick and mortar, cult kitchen, a seasonal grief tasting menu? What's the next big thing for Meet the Void and Chef Einar?
You know, this is a very big question. This is a very big ask, and I'm glad I could do this here with you, Heathen Burgundy, and all of your listeners here on the PNN. I would say, in all due sincerity, that the next big move for Chef Einar would, without a doubt, not be a brick and mortar. We evoke the feelings of trauma, and we encourage you to eat your feelings. And if we establish a brick and mortar location, that implies we have both physical and emotional availability. And that is tremendously against brand. We want to be that restaurant that comes in, serves you really good food, that makes you think about it for ages and ages on end. Make you think about what the fuck did he put into that food that is so cannot be replicated under any circumstances whatsoever.
That's deep.
I am authorized to report this, have partnered up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I believe 7 bearded Vikings. We will be making a History Channel Viking-themed burger restaurant called Blood Eagle Burger, where it will be a physical location where there will be 30 people dressed as Floki, whether they are male presenting or not.
That is my kind of inclusion right there.
So long as
I know
the
your
voice.
Chef Einar, it's been an honor, and I know you're a busy man, but before you go, I ask every guest this type of question. For you, if you could serve one dish, just one, to your younger self, the one still waiting on the curb outside Little League practice, what would it be?
Well, just so your viewers can as you can see, this isn't
So we had a little technical difficulty there, but we are back with Chef Einar. And for those of you that may have lost us for a minute, Chef Einar was explaining to us a meal he would like to go back and serve his younger self.
So
that young boy that was sitting on that curb waiting for Dad to show up.
And I will have to apologize to you and your fans here, Burgundy, when I decided to illustrate the fact that I was in point of fact too tubby for Little League. I do believe my stomach and my cavernous belly button opened up a portal to technical difficulty, so that is my fault and I apologize.
We are a body positive organization here at the Pagan News Network and the Burgundy Hour, so you don't have to apologize.
The one meal I believe that would be best suited to educating my younger self about flavor, what I would serve my younger self, is a very difficult dish called the lasagna of lament. This particular dish was taken in a ritual that sacrificed the souls of 43 Italian grandmothers who were in eternal mourning for the loss of their husbands after the Second World War. It was meant to put so much sorrow and so much passion into the food that it was the only thing you could think of, and it would drive you to the depths of madness trying to replicate the meal.
That's very interesting for someone like myself that grew up with an emotionally unavailable stepfather. That is hits you right there.
That's what we tried to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, and you do it well, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Heathen Burgundy Hour with our guest Chef Einar Blackheart, a man with more knives than coping mechanisms. Thank you for joining me, and to our listeners, if you find yourself alone in the woods, clutching a brisket and screaming into the fog, don't worry. That's just how the flavor sets in.